Welcome to the Mockingcast, the podcast of Mockingbird Ministries. I'm David Zoll, your host, and in a few moments, I'll be joined by my co-hosts, Sarah Condon and RJ Heyman. We come to you every other week to discuss a few of the places where we currently see grace and its absence playing out in unexpected and compelling ways. We're glad to have you with us.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. God.
It's beginning to look a lot like, I don't know, Christmas.
Like RJ's got several sermons ahead of him to preach.
Just like two.
We're recording this on December the 18th. I'm
Yeah.
sure it'll come out in the 20s, and maybe people will listen to it over New Year's. I don't know, but
Maybe they'll never listen to it at all.
Maybe
Who
they'll
knows?
never listen.
Maybe this
to
is the
it.
end.
And to those listeners, we say no. Okay, keep going.
if a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it,
No one hears it.
If a bear, okay.
well, you guys, so that's going to be the vibe. I think this episode is we'll talk a little bit about Christmas, but before we jump into the articles, only one of which actually explicitly has to do with the holidays. How are you doing, and what do you got planned for this next, I don't know, 10 days?
Ooh, we're okay. We're just in it right now, as I think a lot of people are. Josh he has 3 services. I don't know if you preach on Christmas Day, RJ, but he's got that too. So he's got
I've
3.
got an associate, so no.
That's nice. Yeah, he does not have that. And then they like one of our biggest events at St. B's is the Epiphany Christmas the Epiphany party, which is like involves like a giant bonfire. That's 40 feet high.
Amazing.
And it's January 5th. So he's kind of in it for a minute here in a pretty serious way. Yeah. So
He needs to end that tradition. He just needs to be like, no.
But isn't that the thing? Isn't
Sorry,
that the thing
guys.
that you went to, Sarah, like early on and were blown away
it's
by?
incredible.
Like,
I mean, you
yeah.
got to do it. It's like one of the things. Like, it's amazing.
Doesn't everyone bring their Christmas tree and set it on fire? Isn't that
yes.
what happens? Oh my gosh.
And you've got all these little kids running around.
And those things
let's-
explode.
Let's be honest, boys, yeah,
totally.
who are like, how close can we get to the fire? So it's
Don't worry, St. B's listeners.
I know
that
it's a
tradition's
little-
going nowhere.
It's going nowhere.
RJ Heyman has no influence
Just
here.
stirring the pot.
Yes.
Just trying to make Josh's life more difficult.
Just trying to make it a little harder.
Yeah.
We just have a lot like happening right now,
is a
which
lot.
so he's just trying to I'm just trying to keep some casseroles around, when
Yeah.
he rolls in. And
Yeah, how about you, Sarah? How are you doing?
ooh, I'm an Enneagram 3, so it's always hard to know how I'm doing. I feel like I'm doing okay. Like we had the 4th anniversary of my parents' deaths. And that was not as bad as it was last year, which I'm thankful. I mean, that was the bar. So it wasn't as bad as it was last year, which is great. And I didn't have to see an ex-boyfriend's son fail in a piano recital and then take great glee in it as like a moment to uplift my spirit, which if you know.
Yeah, the longtime listeners, remember that story. That was quite a delightful retelling.
God didn't need to give me the lift of a failing 7-year-old to get me through it. So anyway, yeah, I mean, things are okay.
Do you guys do a Blue Christmas service? We were doing one this year. We hadn't done one in a while, but
Yeah.
like I think it's this Friday before Christmas. It's a sad Christmas service, and you wrote that wonderful piece a couple years ago, putting the sad back in Christmas. I think that was that's an opportunity, I think, for churches, but also just Christians to remember. A lot of sadness out there at the holidays.
A lot of sadness, yeah, for sure.
What about you, Rutger?
I am good and exhausted.
Yeah.
We've had events the last 3 nights. We've got another one tonight. We've got another one in a few days. We had 3 funerals last week. This is also, if you're leading a church, this is the time of year where you're like, is the money going to come in? Will we
Yeah.
still be around next year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How's this going
Yeah.
to go?
Yeah.
You know, so
Same with nonprofits. Yep.
well,
Yes.
exactly.
Hold
And
your
you're,
breath.
but hey, it really, it does keep you on your knees a little bit, right?
It
And
does.
there's something I always find it's very liberating when I come to the reality, the realization every so often that like life is impossible, ministry is impossible, this job is impossible, so God's gonna have to show up.
Mhm.
Like we just can't do it. Like God has to show up, and then He
Yeah.
does. Like
Yeah.
every year He does. And then every year I forget that he did the last year. And so I
Yeah.
worry if he's going to
Yeah.
again, can he still be counted on?
Spiritual amnesia.
Yeah, but it's starting to feel like Christmas. Both of our big boys are coming home in 2 days, which we're super
I
excited
bet your
about.
little boy is extremely
Oh,
excited
so
about that.
excited. So excited.
Mm.
And yeah, it'll just be the five of us for Christmas at our house, but that's lovely. And then the 26th, we always have our like rom-com-a-palooza where Jamie and I stay in our pajamas all day and have mimosas, and just watch movies like for 10 or 12 straight hours while the kids play with their toys, their video games and whatever. We started this like 5 years ago. It's our favorite day of the year. Like it's the most amazing thing.
Oh,
Dave, what about you? How are you doing? What are you looking forward to?
Doing well. I think that the acceleration of this time of year is just feels maybe because it's crunched a little bit this year.
Yeah.
Like that we sort of hit the Thanksgiving was done and it was December.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think certainly my wife and I and our kids too just feel like everything's being packed in.
Yes.
And so many obligations. Like every year, it feels like people need to add new things and more things until I know there are going to be years where we wish we had more to do, but I don't know. That's what I
don't
have to tell
know.
myself.
I think there's plenty to do, and there'll be more to do then. Yeah. No,
It's
I
been
think you're
crazy
good.
making. It
Yeah.
has been crazy making, and we've done some. Mockingbird actually today we posted this long list of like our favorite. Todd canvassed a gazillion of Mockingbird contributors about what their favorite Christmas movies. RJ talked about a Boy, and I talked about 8-Bit Christmas, and there's just like we've been watching some of those together, which has been really, really fun. Done a lot of that, but mainly it's just sort of little breaths in between events. Tonight there's
Yes.
a music. One of my son has a music concert tomorrow
Yeah.
night. It's a White Elephant thing. So yeah, grateful. The pageant went well at church. Shout out to
Awesome.
Jane Grizzle. She had to
Jane.
wrangle like 120 kids into this.
Incredible.
At this point, it's just sort of march to the front, sing a song, then you're
Go
done.
away.
I mean, like have some fourth graders read some stuff. But it's
Right.
wonderful, and it's all the moments. It's classic Christmas that all of the mistakes and
Yeah.
the are the best parts, and that's what she said to me. I was asking her, it's like, well, anything that goes wrong makes it only makes it better. So perfectionism around that kind of thing
I totally
doesn't
agree.
mix. Well, all right, let's move on. Thinking of like little movie reviews. This first article struck me as accurate. I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I bet you have. Whatever you do, don't review this, by Eric Taub in the New York Times. Whether you've bought detergent or just had a colonoscopy, every store, website, healthcare provider, airline, credit card company, hotel, and car dealership wants to know if you're satisfied, how they could improve, and whether you'll recommend them. Fueled by the ease of responding online, our inboxes are now clogged with multiple requests per day for 5-star ratings and glowing reviews. And today, no transaction, however mundane, comes without a plea for feedback. The simple act of delivering a parked car now becomes a quote-unquote experience that needs to be rated. The quest for reviews, according to Robert Thompson, who's a founding director of something called the Blyer Center for Television and Popular Culture, the quest for reviews is the ultimate fetishization of capitalism. For centuries, our buy-sell relationship was akin to a one-night stand. Now, every transaction is the beginning of a relationship. Despite its intrusiveness and time suck, many people tend to engage with feedback, often happily. We love to be asked our opinions. We've gone from a world where people kept their diaries locked to one where we share our secrets on social media. Mr. Thompson said the attraction of slobbering attention is deep in our soul. One very fascinating tidbit in this article is that the United States is the capital of review mania. The need for feedback and affirmation is a very American thing, said Gerd Leonard, a Zurich-based self-described futurist, book author, and corporate consultant. Europeans don't do this. We're not gung-ho to write reviews, and many people will just refuse. Now, I say this just, I thought that the idea that everything has now become a relationship and the encroachment of kind of our commercial transactions into these nonstop begging for reviews, I've, of course, felt totally self-conscious because at the end of every episode of the Mockingcast, we ask people to write reviews and give us ratings, which please do. I have to do it for books that I write. And yet, what does it mean? I mean, there's a little bit of a here about we don't trust experts anymore. We don't look at consumer reports. We're much more likely to look at the reviews on Amazon than we are to, trust what some website says, partly because we're just so cynical. And they cite stuff in there about millennials particularly being deeply cynical of traditional marketing. So anytime you can bypass like what big media reviewers say and go straight to people, you want that. But I'm sure you've seen this. Not like churches get reviews. You get the Google. If you look on Google, there are reviews of churches. There are reviews of sermons. There are reviews of everything. What do you think about this? Is this just an example of our need for attention, or is there something good at work? Are we at peak reviewing? Does this annoy you? Is this completely a non-issue?
I always wonder who's reviewing things because I don't do it. I do read the reviews, but I'm always like, who the hell takes the time to do this? So that's the first thought I have. The second thought I have is this whole idea about relationships is really compelling. Like that we are looking at every moment to be a relationship there's something about it feels a little Southern to me. Like I almost think relationship might be the wrong word. Like we're looking to constantly like just run into another human being maybe is better. Do you know what I mean? Like and then review them. Like
Right.
I'm not, because I think about like how, when we're in Oxford, Mississippi, not England. Don't get excited. When we're in Oxford, Mississippi, even now, when I go to things, like every person I run into, I have a relationship with, it feels like I'm constantly seeing old roommates or professors, or it's like the best thing because it's a really small town, especially when the students aren't there. And that's not the same thing as like every interaction we have to like make a judgment call as to whether or not it was a good interaction.
Or your relationship with like your broadband provider.
Right. I mean, that's very different. So I often wonder if people who write reviews a lot, because, there are people like if you click on certain, I think it's like Yelp or something, you can click on their name and you can see, oh my God, this person has written thousands of reviews. And I wonder how lonely they are. I don't know. I just feel like you have to be lonely to write that many reviews.
Yeah, well, it's certainly it's playing on some kind of, this relationship talk is marketers playing on a kind of a loneliness factor, like a belonging.
Like we care what you think. No, you
Remember,
don't.
like you buy a you buy a Ninja blender and they say, "Welcome to the Ninja family," and you're like,
Right.
"What family? What?"
And you're like, I don't know how to do karate. Yeah.
RJ, what are you thinking?
I do not a lot of reviews, but I do write some reviews.
It's
for
RJ that
things-
writes them. Okay.
Some of them, either for things that I really like or things that were really bad, right? So like recently we went to a brand new Korean barbecue place near us, which was unbelievably good, like so good. And so I took a picture and wrote them like a 5-star review because they're new and I want them to do well. And I will say, when I am looking for a restaurant to go to, I will read the reviews, or I've got to get my car fixed somewhere, I will read the Google reviews, because I want to know, and then, the counterexample would be, we had this awful company come try to do some plumbing work in our house, and they were just like, they didn't know anything about what they were doing. And I gave them like a 1-star review. I'm like, don't ever use, they're terrible. They're awful, just to save people the headache, honestly. And I wasn't mean about it. I was just like, these guys have no idea what they're doing. So
That's such a Yankee thing to do. I would never do that.
maybe,
Not for
maybe.
all the tea
I
in
will say
China.
the other thing that came to mind is that whenever we're gonna watch a movie or we're trying to pick out a movie to watch, my wife and I will look at reviews, and Jamie hates it. She's like, I don't want to know what other people said about this movie. I want to make up my
Mm,
own mind,
mhm,
you know?
mhm.
So like, and I think part of the reason I do that is because I don't not that my time is so valuable, but it is like 2 hours out of my life. And do I want to spend the 2 hours watching something,
Mm.
crappy, or something good? Um, but then the relational point, I don't know how connect. I guess if you're sitting around writing reviews all the time, then that definitely, there's some kind of need being fulfilled. And it's to me, it feels like the need to be heard, but also maybe the need to be helpful to some
Mm.
degree, to serve in some kind of small way from the comfort of your couch over your phone or computer.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. I was talking with a woman recently, who's been successful, and she said, I used to serve on a lot of boards, and then I just like I didn't like it anymore. I just wanted to be around people, and I stopped doing that. And for like a few years, I cooked every Tuesday at this local soup kitchen. And like, I'm not a chef, like I don't know how to cook,
Mm.
but I went there every Tuesday and cooked for like 200 people, and it's the most fun I've ever had doing anything,
Mm.
just being around people. And I think about it in the context of my church a lot because, we try all sorts of things. And of course, I'm always anxious, like, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? Are people going to think it's valuable? Will they not? But there is value just to getting together, just to
Yeah.
being together, having a meal. It almost doesn't matter what the quote unquote program is. It matters a little bit. I believe in gospel proclamation, but just like being together. And I find that even in my day to day, like emails to answer and thank you notes to write and things I sort of have to do by myself, but it's always so much more productive and life giving to do something together, with a group of people.
Mm. I mean, I'm a guy who I love to read reviews,
Yeah.
just mainly because, and I'm like you, RJ. I almost never write negative reviews.
Mhm.
My mom is from the South, so I just don't do that. But it's,
Right.
um, I think I see it as encouragement. Frankly, like as a writer and as someone who puts stuff out there all the time, I feel like I know what it's like to feel encouraged by someone else taking the time, feel almost loved and encouraged by that, taking the time to put themselves out there on your behalf. That's a huge act of service, in fact. And sometimes, yes, when kind of becomes this compulsive thing where everything has to be reviewed, rated, measured, quantified, and turned into sort of some 5-star data set, that I find dehumanizing. But on a micro scale, it can be, when it's phrased as encouragement, and that's usually when I do it, is when I'm just been so moved by something. I'm not Sarah, you talked about the Enneagram. Like I have a lot of 7s in my life
Yeah,
who
same.
are enthusiasts.
Yeah.
And although they're usually too enthusiastic to even sit down and write reviews, the ones that I know, they are constantly wanting to turn you on to new things, new
Oh, yeah.
restaurants, new books, new movies, things like that. But the other thing I think of is like after I graduated college, I started out a semi-career as a music reviewer. And I reviewed stuff from my college newspaper, and then it was the early web, and I was writing reviews for a bunch of different websites. And I saw the road ahead of me that I could have potentially taken. And I decided it was a very serious moment where I was like, the mindset that I have to enter to be critical, not just review, not in an encouraging way, but to be critical, was robbing me of some joy. and I had to walk away from it. And I still love reading music reviews, but I knew that to get into that mindset. So I think that there's something that turns here. So interesting, lots going on here. When I talk about music reviews, though, it sort of leads into this next piece, a wonderful piece by Belle Tyndall on the website Seen and Unseen, a great website over in England that's sort of a little bit like a Mockingbird corollary, but with British sensibilities. She writes, what Spotify Wrapped really tells us about ourselves. Spotify Wrapped. For those of you who don't know, since 2016, Spotify, the streaming service, has offered its users an annual feature that gathers up and presents us with the details of our own usage, allowing us to look back over the year through the specific lens of our listening habits. While this may initially sound more than a little dull, it's actually quite the piece of marketing genius. It's the story of our 2024 as narrated by Spotify, the state of our souls as outed by our devotion to Taylor Swift. Every year, in fact, Spotify Wrapped has become more and more of a social ritual. Now, Tyndall writes this: I think our ever growing obsession with it has a lot to teach us about, well, us. Because what's even more interesting is that these deeply personal insights Spotify are offering us are being plastered all over social media. Spotify Wrapped has become a kind of soft launch of our own brand, a low stakes way of putting ourselves out there. Thousands upon thousands of people have taken the data and shared it with the world, sort of as a means through which they are sharing themselves with the world. Why are we doing this? My instinct is telling me that the answer is an incredibly simple, albeit salient one. My hunch is simply that we want to be known. We have a nagging need to show people who we are, in the hopes that we'll be repaid with acceptance, approval even, admiration if we're lucky.
Hmm.
It's a symptom of what some have labeled expressive individualism. We live in a cultural moment that tells us that we are tasked with discovering and defining who we are. It's down to us. It's the responsibility of each individual to build themselves up from the inside out. We get to be the masterpiece and the master, the creator and the created, the poet and the poem. It sounds wonderfully freeing, doesn't it? There's just one problem. No one can actually bear the weight of such responsibility. It's crippling. And so, if once a year we can outsource this monumental task to a Swedish streaming platform, well, why wouldn't we? For a brief moment, we can put our existential crisis in waiting on hold. We can put our feet up. Tyndall concludes, I think it's utter genius wrapped in a guise of triviality. It underhandedly nudges us to acknowledge that we all want to belong. And so I'm not convinced it's individualistic behavior at all. How about we call it a symptom of expressive wanting to belongism instead? Its underlying heart cry is a particularly loud one. I have a story about my Spotify Wrapped. I don't know if you guys are Spotify Wrapped people. This strikes a deep note with me.
Yeah, I'm not. But tell us your story, Dave.
Well, certainly you've seen on social media
Yeah.
people doing this, and you've seen it in other ways. I mean, for some people it's the here's what I read this year. You know, the
sure, the Goodreads thing people do. Yeah,
the
yeah,
Goodreads thing, and or for some people it's Strava. It's like here's how far I ran and what I ran, and I'm sharing it with the world. It's this new kind of disclosure. I think it has a lot to do with wanting to be known. I also, frankly, I think it has a lot to the desire to be justified, to sort of say, I accomplished a lot, I did a lot. This is who I am. But this identity creation thing is very, very palpable. Before I tell the story, though, RJ, you look like you got something to say.
No, I was just trying to think, if I was to post something of that, what would it be?
RJ's just annoyed.
I'm not annoyed. I'm just realizing, like,
this is where a lot of people live, RJ.
It's like, what? Someone asked me what the best movie I saw this year was, and I struggled. I was like, what was it? Like, what did I see? What happened this year? I just feel like I'm living in a constant state of catching up and confusion and exhaustion, you know? But I will say my own personal version of this, of course, I hate to say it, is I don't know, sending out like a Christmas letter to the parish and like thinking back of the past year, like what happened this year at church? Like, was it a good year? Was it not? And that's actually been really helpful to look back at all these things that I forgot happened, you know? And I look back and I start going through pictures. I think through the calendar. I'm like, oh yeah, gosh, it was good. Like God showed up. Amazing things happened, you know? But I'm embarrassed that I don't have a movie list or a book list, or I don't know what my equivalent of that would be.
Well, Fargo season 5 ended in 2024. Remember that, guys? That was pretty great.
That's pretty great.
The documentary Daughters came out this year.
Was that the John Hamm season?
That's unbelievable.
Was season 5 the John Hamm season?
Yes, RJ.
Oh, thank God. Okay, good.
Yes, the one with the communion at the end. It's that one.
Yes, I do remember vaguely. Yes.
So you just have no way into this except for your. But yes, Christmas letters are a way.
They are
of saying
which I'm not the 3-page single space Christmas letter type for those, but I love those who are. I celebrate those who are. But continue,
Sarah. What do you think about this?
I I think I don't know. I think I think we're in this world of like these new behaviors on social media that we don't fully understand.
Hmm.
And so I think it's a little bit of that, is this all positive? I don't think so. I don't think anything is. I hesitate to like disparage it though, because I have friends. I mean, the music thing is fine. It's not what I'm into. But I think it's really cool when I see friends who read like 50 books this year or whatever. And I'm kind of interested to see what they read. And that's exciting. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's the closest I get to connecting to it.
Okay, well, I'll just connect for you guys. This is
Thank you,
for
Dave.
Dave.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Take it away, Dave.
what Spotify Wrapped does is it holds up a mirror to who you actually are rather than who
Oh,
you
wow.
would like to be. And so you cannot game the data. If you spent, 70 hours listening to, one Enya record, that's who you really are compared to, the fact that you like the Strokes when you were 21 or something like that.
Right.
There's an what I like about Spotify Wrapped, and also find deeply uncomfortable, is that it tells the truth. It's the compulsion to share it with the world that is.
Yeah.
I decided not to share it with the world this year because I was ashamed. And
Are you serious? You were ashamed? That's why you didn't share it?
Well, this is why I was ashamed.
What? Yeah.
When I first met R.J. Heyman, I went through his CD collection, and
oh my God,
I was
you
that
are
guy.
Obnoxious.
I mean,
Yeah.
listen, I'm a type. I'm an arc. It's
This is my
pathetic.
favorite Dave Zoll story. Just for me, it's deeply satisfying.
So,
Continue.
RJ, you could tell the story. Just tell this part of it. What did I do?
What it was actually
Use
was
specifics.
I would be very, very specific. I had some CDs, but some of them had been stolen, right? And this is back in the day that if your friend had the CD, you could rip a copy. And so I said, Dave, hey, someone stole my copy of Billy Joel's Greatest Hits.
Mm-hmm.
Could I copy that? And Dave's like, RJ, I don't listen to Billy Joel. I'm not the type of person who listens to Billy Joel. And I was like, wow, what a dick.
Yeah.
But not really. I felt ashamed.
Well, RJ,
and Dave, continue the story.
Guess who was my top artist of 2024?
There's no one greater.
Billy Joel and his song "Turn the Lights Back On," which he released, which the new song I just loved
so much.
It struck a deep, deep chord.
I love it so
and
much.
I just am here to tell people on the Mockingcast I am a joke, and it's or at least God is having a laugh at my expense with Spotify Wrapped. And so I really just need to say that publicly. Maybe that's a different form of identity formation. But in fact, if anything, what it says is that our attempts to curate our identity are ludicrous. And so I went from being a guy who stuck his nose up at Billy Joel to being my favorite artist of the year. And so, there you have it. Am I justified according to works of the ear? No, I am not. I am just a human being who likes to listen to all sorts of different types of music, some of which is deemed cool, much of which is not. And so that's all I'll say about that. But this idea about wanting to be known, wanting to be seen, it's very potent when it comes to the human creature. And so when you talk about Christianity, which apparently addresses the human creature at a profound level, if it doesn't have something to say to us on this level, that sort of who you are is not who you see yourself to be or how you've positioned yourself in the world, but it's who God sees you to be. And that is a word of profound, for someone like me, no wonder justification by faith would be a big, big deal, because it says that you can't be justified by your taste in music or by your Spotify Wrapped or by your Goodreads list or by your best of the year list. So moving on. Any other response to that, RJ Heyman?
I just want to out myself a little bit. I will say I'm one of the people who still listens more to Pandora than Spotify. So very, very exactly.
I didn't even know that still existed.
Exactly.
Allow me to look down my nose at that.
And I'm sure it would be if we listen
to AOL email.
Listen to a lot of yacht rock, a lot of Christopher Cross, and associated genres.
Have you watched the yacht rock documentary?
I just saw that it came out. I'm excited to watch that. I haven't yet.
Brilliant.
I'm
The
sure it
most
is.
fun thing
I'm
ever.
sure it is. And I didn't even know that was a thing till my 22-year-old son was like, Dad, you're totally into yacht rock. I was like, what? I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, you speak my language. Yep.
And then also, probably my favorite song of the year was Dreaming of You Tonight by Selena. Do you remember that song from way back in the day?
Yes.
It's so good. I heard it playing in like the place where I go to buy beer, and I'm like, oh my God, I love this song. So I started a Dreaming of You Tonight Pandora station. It's full of like the Jets, and yet Selena and all these amazing early '80s kind of art. Anyway, so there you go,
I
Dave.
feel like
Do you
I'm witnessing sanctification here, because that is such an incredibly dorky thing to admit to, that I just I'm shocked, I'm humbled, and I want to hear the gospel from you, because I would believe it for anyone who would say that.
Also a lot of Brazilian music, but continue.
Let's move on to something more serious: the micropolitics of family gift giving, by Elizabeth
Ooh.
Bernstein in the Wall Street Journal. Brace yourself, she writes, for the real family drama this holiday season: navigating the gift-giving quagmire. Finding time to shop and figuring out how to pay for it all are the least of our worries. We also have to face the awkwardness of giving a bad gift, the minefield of pleasing, picky in-laws, irritation when a sibling shows up with better gifts, and horrors, shame when the look on our teenage niece's face tells us we're not as cool as we thought. So much for the most wonderful time of the year. Exchanging holiday gifts with family members is fraught, and all the stress and competition is made worse when presents are exchanged at family gatherings. Everyone can see who gave what. Often, givers use the presents to try to influence the recipient, such as when your super fit brother-in-law, who is always urging you to join CrossFit, gives you a barbell for Christmas. Qingling Liu, an academic who studies the dark side of gift giving, said this: gift giving in families can be an act of micropolitics. They're trying to assert their identity on each other. In reporting this column, I heard from people who struggled to figure out what to give wealthier siblings, or argued with their spouses over how much money to spend. One husband says his wife likes to spam everyone with expensive presents, including their daughter's new boyfriend, who, quote, has been in the family for 5 minutes. A woman admitted that she's still fuming that the teenage nieces she sees once or twice a year emailed her long wish lists. She pretended she was sick and skipped her family's Christmas gathering. Many complained about bad gifts. A newlywed wife received an electric can opener from her husband. Another got a set of dish towels with mice embroidered on them from her new mother-in-law. A young man received deodorant balls to put in his gym shoes. He said, "The last time I went to the gym was never." Bad gifts burn because they make you feel unseen or even mischaracterized. You wonder, is this person lazy? Do they even care about me? This article starts off with a situation in which two siblings arrive, and one gives the parents a scrapbook that is really thoughtful, and the other gives them a cruise, like something that was, like a $35,000 cruise. And the difficulty that these two sisters have with each other over the person who had the scrapbook in waiting decides to hold it back, feels so ashamed, doesn't know what to do. I mean, these are real issues that people run into, I think. But we've talked about gift giving. We try to talk about it at least once a year. But what do you guys? Anything come up for you when it comes to the micro politics of gift giving?
I say this with a lot of hesitation. It is easier when your parents die.
I'm thinking about you, and it's like you don't have.
It is, because it's like a whole, and we don't. Josh's dad's dead. We don't have a relationship with his mom. So like we actually don't have to enter into a lot of this at all, which is a blessing, I have to say. I mean,
he doesn't really have siblings anymore either.
No, it's like one of the hard blessings. So we, in terms of family, it's my brother, sister-in-law, and their son. I will say though, we have like adoptive family, that's really stepped up, and they send us Christmas presents and we send them Christmas presents. But I can tell you, when you've got adoptive family, there's no dumb shit. I don't know how to, like, you're just like, there are these families we're kind of a part of, sort of in the outer circle. Mm-hmm. And when I know that there's drama happening within them, I'm just like, wow, good luck out there, kids. You know, like it's just it's not my family. You know what I mean? So yeah, we don't face a lot of this, but I know a lot of people do and struggle with it.
Yeah, Rucker, what do you've got a big family of people.
We do, but I think we kind of decided to make it easy on ourselves.
I was like, you're all boys. I
This
feel like that's
year, yeah,
easier.
and
If it's
also
all girls, it's well,
and a lot of our kids are getting older, so they're getting to the
yeah.
point where they just kind of want gift cards or cash or something. And so I think we sort of decided to just let it lie, like just forget it. Just take care of your own kids. There are a couple kids who are little, like there's Marshall who's 8, and then there's my brother Daniel has a son Frankie who's like 4, and so I think everyone's going to get them presents because that's the magic of Christmas, right? Is like
100%.
seeing little kids open presents, and you want them to have the most, and they do. But yeah, it gets a little bit easier when people get older because they don't want as much, and we're not too, I don't know, we're not too crazy. Although I will say, every year I really stress out about what to get my wife because I love her so much, and I just am always kind of worried that I'm gonna blow it. You know, feels like a lot of pressure.
You often do, I imagine.
That's exactly right. You know me, and so.
Sarah, does Josh give you good presents, or do you guys not do that?
He gives really good presents. Like
That's why
I
he's
get
better than me.
sad when I get sad when I look on like social media. You'll see these women that will post like these like air quotes funny things where like their kids will open stockings and they have all this stuff, and their husband will open the stocking, he has all this stuff, and then it gets to the wife and there's like no one remembered to put anything in her stocking.
A robe, right?
I would divorce a man. I mean, I just like, and every year my stocking is like, the kids are like, what the hell? Because my stocking is like overflowing. I mean, it's just so sweet. Yeah, he's very good at that, which I'm thankful for. But I just saw something that resonated so much with me about gift giving, and it was this, I wish I knew who it was so I could give her credit, but it was a comedian, and she was saying, it's not that Santa Claus isn't real, it's just that Santa Claus doesn't believe in teenagers. Because like if you get a Christmas list from a little kid, it's like this really sweet, like there's misspellings, they ask for crazy things, it's in crayon, and like she's like, when I have to deal with Christmas with my teenagers, she's like, we're both sitting in front of a computer with a spreadsheet, Right. She's like, you don't get a list from teenagers, you get links. Yeah. And we've officially entered into the era of links, and I'm enough of my mom that, especially at Christmas, mom loves Christmas, that I will get you some weird ass shit, even if you're like a teenager that has a very specific list. And I'm interested to kind of see like how that Appalachian
goes.
Music spoons go,
With the 14-year-olds.
We don't know. Yeah. So,
I mean, gift giving, there's so much psychology to it. I mean, it's like, I know that some people use gift giving to overcompensate. Or to basically be like, or to atone, even to make up for something. And sometimes you feel like, gosh, why does this person feel the need to give me so much? Or it, it's totally conspicuously absent. And there's a lot going on. I mean, in this new book I've written, I talk a lot about, grace and gift are almost synonymous in the letters of St. Paul. And so what kind of gifts does God give? And God gives unconditionally. God gives super abundantly. God gives priorly to you and I, who don't really have empty hands, and it's not a tit for tat reciprocal thing. And so I'm always thinking about that. But I know that the right gift given at the right time is an act of grace that can stop someone in their tracks. And I write about it in the book a little, but I remember as a kid where I had a godfather who gave just me a present, and it was always a good present, and there was nothing that he wasn't bound by my parents' need to make everything even. It was just like this abundant present given to me as the middle child, and I look forward to it, and it meant the absolute world to me. One year he gave me like a CD by Sting, and I didn't know Sting at that point. And you know, it certainly would. If I'd been 21, I would have thought that was uncool, but it was so cool when I got it, and I was like 12, and I thought my brother looked at me with jealousy, and it was pure grace for me. It was pure magic in that moment. So it was independent of a lot of these little internal political things. So it's very interesting to me because when you get a really bad gift, I think the author is right. It says something like you don't know me at all, and that can feel pretty demoralizing.
I think it's hard to not have my mom here because I'm a good gift giver. We like to give gifts in this family. I am a good gift giver. My mom is a good gift giver, and it's hard to not have the specificity of her gifts. Like that is really hard. Like I kind of face that every year now. And there's no answer to that. That's just
because it would
what
say,
it is.
"I see you and I love you and I've been thinking about you."
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's just what it is. But I do want to say like it's never too late. Like I guess I don't mean to like harp on this, but it does make me really sad how many women in my life work so hard to make Christmas happen for their whole family, and then they get nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never too late, gentlemen, to go to Whole Foods, get all the little chocolates. If she's into tinned fish, get her some tinned fish, get her a little bottle of champagne, go over to the Whole Body. You don't even have to leave Whole Foods. Get some of the bath stuff. You know what I mean? Like
Lady gifts.
It's
They're
never
a
too
thing.
late to say she has made this all happen. And, you know, but I mean, I do remember though, when mom and dad died that first year, not the second year, because we were really doing Christmas alone and I was a mess. And I'm pretty sure Josh went to the jewelry store, you know, the whatever. I think he went to the like Nordstrom's jewelry section or whatever and went to the case and just picked out the most expensive thing he could find. And I did not like it. And I took it back. And, you know, and we had this really beautiful conversation about how he was like, I just didn't want you to be sad. And I didn't know what to do. And I think there's so much beauty and honesty in also in that, you know, and maybe not getting it right, but saying, hey, this is I just want you to not have to feel sad anymore.
Oh,
so
that's so touching. I'm married to an extremely good gift giver.
Yeah, I bet you are.
To the extent that it's a little bit like we've had conflict over the years about how over the top she is with gifts. And it's always been, I've come to realize that the way I've approached it is inferior. It's simply,
That's okay.
She's always says, you know, what do we have money for if not to spend on other people, like people we love, and I'll say we don't have money. So, but she's like, well, this is how I want to use what we have.
Yes.
And you know what? As the years go by, she's right. She schooled me in a very, very powerful way. But I also, Saturday Night Live really did have one of those lightning striking moments when they did that Kristen Wiig skit about Christmas and all the kids they sing that song about all these amazing things they got, and then mom just gets a robe, and like every year she gets a robe, and I always also go back to the Holly Jolly Women of Christmas post that Sarah wrote years ago.
Oh my gosh.
About all the ladies who are making it work.
Making it happen. I mean, I preached this last Sunday and I opened the first few minutes of it by saying, like, you know, the gospel was the brood of vipers, and, you know, that this is these edict that we're getting in the gospel to do better, to be better, is a very good and very possible thing, especially if you are a woman right now.
At Christmas, yeah.
Yeah, and went on to sort of name all the things we're doing, and then said, this doesn't actually have anything to do with my sermon. I just wanted to say it out loud. And there were women cheering in the congregation. I was like, yes, this is a lot we're all doing right now. It's crazy. Yes.
Well, remember they asked classically, maybe you told me this, Sarah, but they asked Martha Stewart one time, you know, how do you find your Zen at Christmas as a woman? She said, well, if you have Zen at Christmas as a woman, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And that leads me into this. Hey,
I have to say, you can go in a second, but I have to say what I love about that statement, and I wanted to write this and I haven't, but also I think there's something that recognizes the cosmic power of Advent, of heading into Christmas. Like, I also love that too. Like, why do you think you're going to get Zen in the middle of the cosmos ripping in two? Do you know what I mean? So, anyway, yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Well, this is the segue I've been waiting for, because Martha Stewart. I watched the Martha Stewart documentary last night, and Sam wrote this most wonderful thing on Mockingbird about it, Martha Stewart in the Pursuit of Perfection, and we're going to talk about it right now.
Great.
No one understands the standard of perfection like Martha Stewart. If you've seen the new documentary, Martha, you'll know her modus operandi was living a life that's perfectly perfect. Rather than selling easy-bake convenience, Martha sold perfection. She knew what she was doing, of course, as the original influencer, and that's how the documentary sort of positions her. Martha Stewart created a standard that was both inspiring and impossible. And for a while, she achieved perfection, at least professionally. Having been a model as a teenager, a successful stockbroker in her 20s, and an A-list caterer in her 30s, there was nothing she couldn't do. Anything under her control was always going to look fabulous. As a fellow stockbroker recalls in the film, whatever Martha can control is going to be fine. Whatever she can't control is going to drive her crazy. Indeed, Martha had what it took to achieve perfection in the eyes of the world, but, we learn, at the cost of her personal life. Around the time of her divorce, she wrote in a journal, "I'm sitting on a plane right now, crying, and cannot believe myself. I should be vital, beautiful, and desirable. And here I am, a total wreck. I'm 45 years old, worried and lonely and hopeless. The future is a total blur." Several years later, now this is after she built a company that's like the first huge IPO, and she becomes the first self-made female billionaire, Martha Stewart would be arrested for insider trading and spend 5 months in prison, the absolute antithesis of the life she modeled. Her infamous sentencing had been labeled a total sham, most people believing that her prosecutors had targeted her as a powerful woman and wanted to take her down for that reason. Whatever the case, it seems God may have been the one targeting her in her fall from grace as well. The woman who was the symbol of success was now bunkmates with the lowest of the lowly. At the time, she was one of the most famous women in America, and yet from her cell she wrote, "I feel very inconsequential today, as if no one would miss me if I ever came back to reality." All the while, she was meeting with her cellmates, mentoring them, and giving advice about their business ideas. She introduced the inmates to cucumber sandwiches fresh from the garden. For the first time in years, she had no illusions of perfection. She began to make friends with people who could not advance her career. After her release, a close colleague said, she had lived before being worried about what people thought of her, and then the worst thing that could have happened. She'd been set free by going to prison. Fast forward a few years later, and Martha Stewart has been resurrected. Albeit she is not exactly a new creation. She's still Martha, insisting her landscaping team trim her boxwoods a certain way and swearing vengeance on her former prosecutors. But her public persona is not nearly as self-serious as before. Her co-host and bosom buddy now is, as we know, Snoop Dogg. Where the old Martha was the paradigm of poise, the new Martha can laugh at one of her biggest professional failures. Sam ends by saying, Jesus may call us to be perfect like our Heavenly Father, but not in the way we would have thought. We are presented blameless, not based on the perfection of our apple pie crust, manicured gardens, or meticulously curated morality, but by the perfection of another. Though we strive for perfection like Icarus flying toward the sun, when our own self-made wings fail under the weight of our frailty, we fall not from grace, but into grace. I think Sam does not indicate that Martha is somehow undergone some deep change in character. She's still, not very nice. What I loved about this documentary is that there's a lot to not like about Martha Stewart, but there's also a lot to like. I'm so sort of, if she didn't exist, you'd have to invent her. Like, she's so fascinating, and the feelings she inspires in people, especially women, and I'm talking about my mother's generation primarily, are really strong. Like, mention Martha Stewart, no one's neutral about her. And there's another point in the documentary where they say the reason people felt so strongly about Martha is that she not only sold perfection it wasn't like a bikini photo in Maui. She sold like attainable, or at least attainable perfection. That was the
Right.
whole thing. Like, you could have this, you're just not doing it.
If you're willing to put in the work.
If you're willing to put in the work.
Yeah.
And that's more galling. But at the same time, she's this like extremely driven person who accomplished stuff that like no woman in her situation had any idea of accomplishing. And we live in the world that Martha Stewart built. She really was the original influencer. Anyway, I don't know, Sarah, if you've seen this documentary, but
I've been saving it.
okay.
I mean, I'm a huge Martha Stewart fan. I loved that,
She hated it, the documentary, by the way. She's gone public.
Has she?
Of course she has. She says, I love the first half. I hate the second half. Sorry.
That's so funny.
Yep.
No, it's good. I was watching an interview with her about Ina Garten's new book that came out.
Okay.
And they're sort of,
Are they
they're
frenemies?
they're in the same stratosphere. Well, they were actually very good friends. They kind of started in the same place and everything. And I guess it was Andy Cohen that was interviewing her. And he said, but she doesn't talk to you anymore, does she? And Snoop Dogg was sitting there. And you can see him kind of lean forward. And he's like, why doesn't she talk to you anymore? And Martha was like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. And he's like, no, Martha. Like, why is she not? Like, I mean, it's this fascinating kind of interaction. And Martha Stewart says, well, she stopped talking to me when I went to prison. And of course, Snoop Dogg then says something like, that never happened with me, which is like this great moment. But like, she really fell so dramatically and then managed to do such beautiful work. I did some chaplaincy work at the prison that she had served at. This was after she left.
Really?
Yeah. And just the work that she did with women who are pregnant, like
Wow.
there was some systems within that prison to help those women keep their babies for a while, like all that stuff. I mean, just did incredible work while she was there. I love Martha Stewart because I think we don't like women who are unapologetically themselves.
Yeah.
And and I mean, I think we can watch, I mean, put the Martha Stewart documentary right up against the Michael Jordan documentary, right? Like that's the same thing.
Or Lance
like,
Armstrong.
Yeah, they're just unapologetically themselves, and it bristles us a little bit.
There's a surprising amount of candor in the documentary
Yes.
that is like, I mean, she admits to having all these basic infidelity on both her side, her
Affairs.
husband's side, but she talks about her failures and this, that, or the other. She talks about not being a natural mom, yet the ambition. I mean, should it be a surprise that the first self-made female billionaire was extremely focused on her career and perfectionist and ambitious? No, that should not be a surprise. That's what it takes. And do you step on people on the way? 100%. So, but Sarah, the overall painting of her I felt was of a multifaceted human being who is extraordinary and extraordinarily lovable and extraordinarily hateable, like at the same time, but in a way that sort of traces the trajectory of like American womanhood and domesticity and all these things. But the fact that she has ended up as a self-deprecating bosom buddy with Snoop Dogg, it's just there's something about God's sense of humor in that.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that the turning point in her whole redemptive arc came at a Comedy Central roast for Justin Bieber. I had no clue that was what happened.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. Well, just brace yourself. I spoiled something for you. RJ Heyman grew up, Martha Stewart was
she's actually his godmother.
Was
People don't know
Westport.
that.
She's Westport. RJ Heyman is
Connecticut,
New Canaan. So I mean, let's hear from the belly of the beast over there.
Jamie's seen it, of course, and has been telling me that I need to watch it, but I haven't watched it yet.
There's like about 50 sermon illustrations in this movie.
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to use it this Sunday because it's just another story about the prison of success and the freedom of failure, right? We think what we want to be is too big to fail, but actually what we want to be is too small to fail. Mm-hmm. And thinking about that in terms of the Christmas story, and also this Sunday is the Magnificat, Mary's song about God being on the side of the lowly and the humble and the weak. People like her, this poor teenage unmarried pregnant woman who has to run off to her cousin. Why do you think she ran off to go see Elizabeth for a few months? Probably because she might have gotten killed in Nazareth.
Right.
Been stoned to death for adultery or something. She had to go into hiding for a bit. But that's where and how God works. That He works in smallness and humility, and in the thing that we most wish wouldn't happen becomes the thing that makes us and sets us free. And then, of course, it's this dynamic thing, right? Because now she's successful again, and she's probably taking on some of those same pressures. She's probably experiencing some of those same emotions, hopefully with a little bit looser hand. But
Oh, for sure.
right, but
Yeah,
how
for
do you?
sure with the looser
But how do
hand.
you care and not care?
Yeah.
How do you enjoy the blessing that God gives when He's giving it without becoming too attached to it, or allowing it to become too much a part of your identity, or allowing it to become a prison again?
Yeah.
How do you find freedom when things are going well?
Yeah.
So there's just a lot to be said about that. But
Well, there's a
yeah.
scene of her visiting with the Muslim inmates at her female prison
Mhm.
and talking to them about how to be an entrepreneur that you just think no one could have scripted this except
Mhm.
for God.
Except for
Like
Jesus,
that is Martha Stewart is talking to her fellow inmates, and they've asked her for advice, and she's actually gone and like kind of giving it her best shot. I thought, and when she leaves the prison, she's wearing it. She wears this shawl that's one of the women in prison knit her,
Mhm.
and I thought it's kind of like when we talk about Spotify Wrapped and all these identity stuff. It's like she's got this new identity. Again, same old Martha. I don't want to over spiritualize it, but it's hard not to see lots of echoes of lots of really cool things. Talk about people in sort of the least of these and the God's work. This is the final article for us today, and it's off our normal beaten path, but I just thought it was fabulous. CJ highlighted it in a recent Weekender. This was written by Angela Lou Fulton in Christianity Today. Finding Sobriety and Jesus in Vietnam's Christian Drug Rehabs. The article starts out this. In March 2013, the government-run drug rehab center in Hanoi released Hung Quang Pham early. They didn't want the bone-thin heroin user with AIDS to die in their facility. But before Hung left, friends helped carry him to a Bible class held inside the rehab facility, and Christians told Hung about Jesus. He remembers a room full of jumping and singing where men and women freed from their addictions praised God. Jesus offered joy, they said, and they told Hung how Jesus could rescue him from drugs, how he could heal his body and save his soul. After Hung left rehab, he went home, laid in bed, and waited to die. Not long afterward, a pastor's wife visited him and handed him a Bible. Hung started praying what he felt were impossible prayers, and God answered them, one after another. Hung got out of bed, suddenly able to walk. His body was healed. Given a new lease on life, Hung volunteered with a Christian drug ministry, returning to the government rehab center to share his story. He found a wife, a woman who had also struggled with addiction. He was miraculously cured of HIV. In 2021, despite being told they would never have children, Hung's wife gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Now, then the article talks about the drug problems in Vietnam have to do with the availability of cheap heroin, which has ravaged that country and had to create all these government-run rehab centers. But the article is about highlighting the differences between the Vietnam's compulsory government-run drug rehab centers and the voluntary religious-affiliated ones which have cropped up. As in many Southeast Asian countries, Vietnamese government-run compulsory treatment centers are rife with human rights abuses, including forced labor and torture. Almost everyone who completes treatment ends up back on drugs. But each of the approximately 60 Christian drug rehab centers in Vietnam has miraculous stories like Hung's, walking corpses rising into new life. They say a revival is breaking out among the outcasts of Vietnamese society. And this report is absolutely rife with testimonies of the miraculous, like stuff that any sort of, disenchanted Westerner needs to hear. But this is what the rehab facilities, how they describe their own motivations that spoke most powerfully. The founder of this movement is a guy named Ngo Tan Si. The Christian rehab, he says, is all about love. It has the power of the Holy Spirit, the truth that is the word of God, and also the preaching of the changing of the mind. Once a new arrival to Nyo's Christian rehab detoxes from drugs and acclimates to the schedule, the staff prays for deliverance in areas where the person is struggling. It's about finding healing not only from their drug addiction, but also in other areas of bondage, such as unforgiveness, anger, sexual sin, or unclean spirits. Unlike compulsory centers, Vietnam's Christian rehabs have no barbed wire fences or locked gates to keep people in. Students can walk away if they choose. Nyo says there is only offense in your mind. He wants participants to know that the center of God is not a prison. Students are told that the rehab center is run as a Christian ministry and they're welcome whether or not they become Christians. We very much respect their choice. We want to let them receive and see the presence of the Lord through older members in the rehab by the way they talk, deal with new members, and especially their love for one another. Transformation doesn't stop with those who join the center, though. Many parents, after suffering for years watching their children waste away from addiction, witness their child's transformations and put their faith in Jesus. This is part of Noah's larger goal of sending students out with a vision. God changed me. God changed you. God can change anybody. Go save other drug addicts. And I guess the success rate of the Christian drug centers is like 30% or so, as opposed to 0%. I just thought this was a powerful testimony to something really cool going on in a corner of the world that I don't know much about. I don't know.
Also, we'll take 30% if 70% of the people there, the other 70% still get to hear about the grace of Jesus. Like, that's a pretty, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
those are good. That's 100% of people hearing that God is for them and not against them, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah. And also that they're not imprisoned and it's not compulsory. I love the fact that they're not just saying God loves you, but it sounds like they're embodying it in a powerful way, in the midst of like the worst addictions, like ravaging addictions.
Yeah.
But it's people surrounded also by miraculous healings that Christmas miracles left, right, and center. Anything else? RJ, what do you think?
Something you said reminded me of, honestly, my wife's conversion story a little bit. Like, she wasn't addicted to anything except maybe she was sort of addicted to self-sufficiency and hard work. And when I met her, she was going to school full time and working full time and just working like 15-hour days or something. And then I don't know, she started getting interested in Jesus. She sort of thought it was a load. She wasn't sure she believed it, but she did start praying, and she started writing her prayers down like in a little journal and going back every few weeks and realizing that all of her prayers were being answered. And just this realization, like, there's something to this. This is real. This is not, the presence of God is real. So just prayers answered. That might be the best answer to. I was talking to someone recently actually about that, and she was asking actually this woman how my wife came to faith, and I shared that story, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, that's," because she was not sure how she felt about God and Jesus and faith, but this idea of like, if you don't think it's real, just start praying for what you want or what you need, but write it down because you probably won't remember what you prayed for. But then when it gets answered, you'll see that God is real. So maybe think of that. Also, did either of you guys listen to that podcast I sent you about the homeless, the village for homeless people outside Austin, Texas?
I haven't yet.
It was on the Daily Podcast a couple weeks ago. It's called, a Texas town or Texas village takes a different approach to homelessness, something like that. And it's about a man who grew up in Houston, of course, and his mother was deeply mentally ill, and when he was 18, he became her medical guardian. He had to commit her to an institution because he couldn't care for her. She couldn't care for herself, and became successful, and then kind of had a spiritual awakening at a Christian men's weekend. That he says later, is like, if I'd known we were going to be a lot of hugging and holding hands and crying, I never would have gone, but the Holy Spirit showed up and inspired him to start serving in a soup kitchen, and he got to know some homeless people. But the upshot is, a few years later, he caught a vision and he raised $20 million and got 50 acres donated. And now something like 400 formerly homeless people live together in this community, and they all have either their own RV or tiny house or mobile home. And he and his wife live in the center of the community, this man, and deeply Christian. And, but also he doesn't force anyone to get clean or sober to come live there. He takes them as they are, because he knows that, as you said, recovery is a long and winding road, and sometimes people get better and sometimes they don't, right? But that God is real nonetheless, and that He loves people even when they can't get their act together. Um,
Yeah.
just similar, just really encouraging stories of the power of God being made known in tangible ways.
Yeah.
And if you doubt things like miracles, just read a story like this, and it's like, no, miracles are still happening.
Yeah,
You probably just have to go hang out in a drug rehab center in Vietnam to see them, or keep a prayer journal. One of those two things, or go to prison,
Or go to prison.
or go to prison,
Or go to an AA meeting.
Miracles happen in the places we least want to go.
But this is why
Yeah.
the addiction is just such a vital I guess venue for the grace of God. It's where either God shows up and does something, or you die. And that's sounds like that's what's happening in these. It's not 100% rate.
No.
But certainly those who are seeing it are saying, well, something happened where something didn't have to happen, or something. The problem is so large and so it's so beyond
Intractable. Yeah.
one's power, one's personal power, that only a power greater than ourselves can
Yes.
restore us to sanity or health. Sarah, you got any closing words?
I was thinking of, we were talking about this before and I wanted to share it. So this Sunday I got to preach at St. B's, which was really fun. And I talked about the classic movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with John Candy and Steve Martin, which Josh has been trying to get me to watch for years. And I've been like, I'm not going to watch your stupid movie. And then I watched it, and it's like such a good movie.
You hadn't seen it? Oh my
no,
gosh.
I'm shocked my dad didn't have me watch it. But anyway, I'd never seen it. And I became sort of fixated with it and read a bunch of articles about it. And if you don't know the movie, it's these two guys, they're strangers. They meet on trying to get home for Christmas. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Hilarious antics ensue. And John Candy's character is a total pain in the ass. Like, he just keeps showing up and ruining things like over and over again. And you feel this is over identification that is genius on the part of the writer with Steve Martin, because you're just so overdone by John Candy. And then there's this beautiful moment at the end where they're supposed to be going home for Christmas to their respective homes.
Thanksgiving.
Is it Thanksgiving?
Yeah, it's the ultimate Thanksgiving movie.
Okay, well, sorry for the people at St. B's who heard Christmas. But so they're supposed to be going home for Thanksgiving, and there's this great moment where we find out who John Candy's character actually is, and we find out how much loss he's experienced, and we find out how broken his life is. And what I've learned is that there was actually this extended monologue that was cut. And Steve Martin was interviewed about it. And he said, I just was standing there because John Candy delivered it. They just cut it. But he said, I was standing there listening to him and I was just weeping because it was so beautiful. This is not even the whole thing, but I just want to read this ending part because it leans into sort of what we've been talking about. So he says this. He says to Steve Martin's character, I'm sorry about all this. I just kind of lost control this time. Every year since my wife's been gone, I've gotten closer and closer to losing it. Usually I head for a church. I can feel like I'm a part of something when I'm in church. This time, I guess I didn't get to church fast enough. It's
What?
so, I know and there's so much more. Like, he talks about the life that he thought he would have, how she wanted 3 kids, but couldn't have kids, how they didn't have family. I mean, it's just, and he says this thing of like, oh my gosh, this is so good. He says, I sort of attach myself to people from time to time, like with you, especially around the holidays. I can take it in March, July, and October. I don't mind it.
Yeah.
So, as we're closing out this episode and thinking about the least, the last, the lost, and the lonely, and remembering that we all exist in one of those categories as well. I don't know. I think there's something beautiful about remembering that we're all kind of in the not yet and already. And even if we look at other people and think, well, mine not yet already is so much better than theirs, it's not. Like, we're all standing in the same valley, waiting for the sun to come up. So
RJ.
I also want to say that the Jesus figure in that movie is John Candy.
totally.
Right?
Yes.
Because
totally.
Steve Martin is just so, he's Martha Stewart pre-prison.
Yeah, he is.
Right? He's perfectly buttoned up. He's got it all together. He's on a mission. He knows where he's going.
Yeah.
And then this like sort of impossible person who also is kind of lovely and relates to people well, just blows it all up and messes it all up. And yet through that disaster, Steve Martin discovers his own humanity.
Yeah.
Right. And discovers his own capacity he develops a capacity to love that he didn't have before. And that we do worship this man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, that things don't go according to plan for Jesus, but and he shows up and he can be really annoying, and he can, and I say this from personal experience, he can send us places that we didn't expect to go and maybe even to want to go, but he's with us and he's doing something and he's transforming us into people who can actually love. Yeah.
I kind of, when I was watching it, I kept thinking, wouldn't it be wonderful? Because we all wish we had John Candy still. And wouldn't it be wonderful if the character in this movie was just the continuation, like we just got the continuation in Home Alone, where like he's gotten remarried and he's in a polka band and like, like there was something really like
I think
beautiful about it.
Polka, polka.
Didn't John Hughes wrote both of those movies, I think.
Yeah, there was something about it that I just wanted that to be his future. That his future isn't what was it that Martha Stewart said? His future isn't completely unknown and a blur. Like that there's beauty and hope ahead. So,
gosh, well, good Lord, thank you guys for that, Sarah. I want to hear that. I'll post a link to that sermon.
It to you. Yeah.
That is fertile ground for preachers this Christmas. Holy moly, yeah.
All right, the two of you, Merry Christmas to you. Merry Christmas to all of our listeners. And we just wish you a very happy New Year. And the space between week, which always feels like grace or sometimes sadness, but usually grace. I hope you're able to get a rest and good things on the horizon in the new year. So
see you in 2025. Love you guys.
See you guys.
You too. Bye.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Remember, you can find us on the web at www.mbird.com. And we'd always love to hear from you at info@mbird.com. Audio production for the Mockingcast is provided by TJ Hester. And if you like what you've heard, please drop over to iTunes and leave us a rating or review. Until next time.